Welcome to our panel discussion and analyst summary about IAM Managed Services, how customers create benefit and speed up their delivery. My name is Heiko Klahl. I'm the Chief Marketing and Sales Officer of IC Consult, and I will be the moderator of today's panel discussion. With me are Andras Chair, Forrester analyst and Vice President of Forrester. He will give initial discussion and share his thought about managed services and identity and access management. Stefanos Riga from BMW, product owner and a very experienced IAM professional who can share his real-life experience, what it means doing managed services for identity and access management. Andre Briebe, CTO of IC Consult Group, an industry expert and thought leader in the area of IAM. And last but not least, Heiko Hütter, CEO of Service Layers, CEO of the platform for enabling managed services in a highly automated and DevOps style way. I would say let's start with the thought leadership talk of Andras Chair, analyst at Forrester. Andras, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much. Yes, absolutely. Thanks so much. Can you guys see my screen here? Is this visible?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So basically, today I'm here to talk about drivers for identity and access management, introductions, implementations, and also the drivers around why use a system integrator, why use the managed security services provider in the implementation. So let's dive in. First and foremost, it's zero trust, right? So identity and access management is a key pillar to implementing zero trust, right? So you have, in essence, the workloads up top, you have networks, you have devices, and you have people all in line or all in place to protect the data at your organization. And obviously, you have automation and orchestration, visibility, and analytics, basically imbuing and interweaving all these areas, workloads, networks, devices, and people. But at the end of the day, it's all about data protection. So clearly minimizing the threat surface, making sure that only the right people with least privilege or zero trust privilege can have access to the right resources is the ultimate purpose of identity and access management. Who has access to what and why, and who approved this access, right? So if you look at the drivers for identity and access management implementation, you're going to see that there's a number of different things, right? So security is a big question. How you reduce the security, the threat surface of an organization, apply separation of duties checks or SOD checks, and making sure that you don't have in an organization, people have been through a lot of different roles, a lot of different positions where they've accumulated access, resulting in literally, incompatible access, right? So, for example, somebody who works in HR should not be able to submit a pay increase request and then approve it, themselves, right? So it's just not that's just really a separation of duties checks violation, or an accounts receivable and accounts payable clerk. These types of roles and access rights are usually incompatible, and if somebody has all these access rights, that typically constitutes a separation of duties violation, which is a huge problem in SOX, which I'm going to talk about next. Obviously, least privilege is the name of the game. It is very difficult to do in reality because you're stepping on people's toes, causing all kinds of political issues in many cases as well. And obviously, enforcing all this is not trivial either. The second driver that we see in identity and access management is compliance. So SOX, GLB, HIPAA, FERC, PSD2, you name it. You have open banking, you have some kind of a compliance requirement in the background where you're able to kind of answer the internal or external auditor questions much more efficiently in a lot shorter time if the company is using good identity and access management products and processes. Reducing the IT administration cycle time and improved automation, so when somebody joins or moves or leaves the organization, you don't manually try to grant them access, change access, and revoke access, and disable the user, but it all happens at least partially in an automated way. The fourth item I would highlight is agility and service delivery improvements. So how you're able to actually improve the core competencies of a business. And this is especially important with customer-facing identity and access management, but also with workforce-facing or employee-facing identity. If people don't have to wait to get all their access rights when they join a company, then they can serve customers better. If people are not hindered by trying to log it into an application, they're doing their job a lot faster. And obviously, passwordless authentication is a buzzword that we hear. The password is dead because of computational as well as just process reasons. Passwords can be phished, snooped, cracked, reverse engineered, replayed, stuffed, and so on. So we need to find other types of authentication mechanisms. Here's the problem, right? So when you're looking at identity and access management, most of the problem and the task is really, as with an iceberg, that 9/10 of the iceberg is under the water and only 1/10 is above the water. The user-facing identity and access management responsibilities, in other words, logging in somebody in an office into an application, or making sure that somebody's able to submit their access request, right, is definitely the smaller part. It's 1/10 of the problem. The other 90% of the problem is basically making sure that you have a process, making sure you have an implemented identity and access management and an automated system in the background, making sure that everything works smoothly to support what the user wants to do. And this is an area where we still see a lot of struggle, a lot of questions. So a lot of organizations ask me, how long does it take for them to do an identity and access management implementation or process? And I typically tell them that, look, it may be 3 months, 6 months, but if you think of identity and access management as basically a timeline, right, with a beginning and an end, that is not the right way of looking at it, right? The right way of looking at identity and access management is just like the laundry, right? It's a never-ending cycle. It's a never-ending process. There's always other things to do. And it's really an endless loop, right, where you have to design something, implement it, and then respond to the ever-changing business requirement, right? So identity and access management is a very unique, very interesting area that combines people, process, technology aspects to a lot greater degree and a lot greater depth than pretty much any other type of discipline, even in security. So identity has to interface with systems, technologies, connectors, endpoint systems, login, authenticator types, etc. It has to map with processes of an organization, the joiner, mover, leaver process, or other customer-facing identity process like self-service types of processes. And then at the people level, you have to also work within internal stakeholders. I'm going to talk more about that later on during my presentation. So if we look at this, right, the players, right, and owners or participants and stakeholders in identity and access management typically include vendor organizations like IT security. They're typically the leaders for employee or workforce-facing identity. They do the coordination, the technical installation, custom coding, and operations. Very often you have HR, right? They can help with the role-based access control and design of roles, mapping job roles to enterprise job roles. There's usually a line of business, number of stakeholders. These are business process folks who are just wanting to use the solution. This is the upper, 10% of the iceberg, right? They want wireframes or screens, mock-ups. They want to understand, how to interact with the identity process, how to interact with the applications, how all this comes together. There's obviously the compliance and audit team. They are worried about audit and compliance requirements, separation of duties requirements that they have to answer to their auditors. And then you might have SOX requirements, you might have HIPAA, you might have GLBA, PSD2, and a number of 3, 4, and 5-letter acronyms that are country specific here. There's obviously application developers, right? So there's a lot of aspect of identity, for example, user provisioning of user IDs into applications, authentication, but even authorization user stores. What a user can or cannot do in an app can lead to a lot of discussion here, right? And then, so this is a lot of, quite a large number of internal stakeholder teams and groups. And if you add basically external teams, right, you typically would have somebody like a third party helping with business process design and redesign, experts and consultants. This could be any number of business consultancy companies. You might have a system integrator in the mix. They are architect and implementation consultants that really help with gluing the business process to the product itself, right? And implementing and doing the heavy lifting, the coding, in identity and access management apps, as well as outside, maybe helping application developers of the company change some of the apps to do single sign-on or be able to connect to the provisioning system. And then typically there's the IAM vendors professional services, right? So this could be somebody like from a vendor from an IAM vendor who helps out and has a deep understanding of a product that they're going to use, right? So that's definitely a lot of different teams, right? A lot of different kinds of people, a lot of different priorities, agendas to kind of reconcile. It is very often a political battle for internal teams as well in an organization, and typically it is security against the business requirements, the business agility, service delivery that people kind of have contention about. A lot of times, if it's a replacement of a product, then the new vendor selection can cause some friction as well, or tension. So identity and access management really kind of has to solve all these. HR involvement typically is a problem. HR often does not want to play along with the identity and access management problem, nor do application developers, right? So one of the reasons, right, we see end user organizations looking at system integrators is to basically be, the system integrator being an independent, unbiased organization that can actually help coordinate these internal resolution of these internal friction, conflicts, etc. So being a psychologist, a group psychologist for the organization to a great degree. So the other obviously question here is you want to have, right, when hiring a system integrator, an MSSP, and a vendor, professional services and architects, you want to be able to bring in industry best practices into the conversation, right? So the customer or end user organization may have requirements or thoughts or initiatives or ideas a lot of times that really are, they look good on paper, right? Or they look good in theory, but in reality, the system integrator or the MSSP actually knows from experience, right, that the customer's idea is dead, right? Before it's not kind of feasible to implement that idea, or it costs 10 times as much money to implement that idea. So SIs and MSSPs actually bring in this implementation, past experience, right? These are the kinds of things that SIs and MSSPs are telling the end user, customer, and organization that, hey, you should not do asynchronous provision. You should not do a very tightly coupled mainframe bootstrapping, and so on in single sign-on, right? And many other things, right, that may not be apparently evident, right? That the customer may have obviously never seen. The customer has in many occasions have never worked with the vendor's product. They have no idea how the vendor solution works and how the vendor solution can actually map their requirements. This is also the job of the SI and MSSP to be able to translate those requirements, and again, warn against things that they have seen not to work for other vendors, for other customers during previous implementations. So why do we see identity and access management projects and needing professional help and system integrators. So obviously time to value and total cost of ownership reduction, right? You can learn everything and anything you want, right? But the problem is hiring an expert, at least initially, to be able to teach and transfer the knowledge, very specialized, very difficult to find knowledge as to how to do a connector, how to integrate an application into the identity and access management solution is very important. Increasing overall complexity of identity and access management. This is an unfortunate fact of life, right? That as products are getting bigger, the policy configuration in these identity and access management solutions is just getting bigger. A lot of times IAM products have grown and really at a really great pace and really exponential pace, right? Analytics, various connectivity, provisioning, and all this other good stuff. But in a lot of cases, the requirements have gotten more complicated. So what we see here today is that today's identity and access management products are able to map to today's identity and access management processes and requirements. It's just you have a lot more kind of material as an implementer to look through. A professional services organization, system integrator, can definitely help with this thing. Inability to staff identity management projects with internal staff continuously or at all, right? A lot of organizations do not have good IAM people, at least at the beginning of or onset of the project. They just don't, right? And hiring a good, expert, right, for a product portfolio, right, an identity product portfolio can be even prohibitively expensive, and in some geographies, you cannot like scale up and down in internal staff, right? Once you hire somebody, you cannot fire that person, right? So that has some implications. So it's turning the cost structure and implementation, staff augmentation structure into a much more flexible formation is another reason we hear people working with IAM implementers. The SI or system integrator organization has expertise in business process reorganization. So re-implementing existing problematic, messy things, it makes no sense. You have to use the IAM implementer to do this. And as I said, the SI system integrator is very often a neutral liaison between the customer, the organization's internal departments, and kind of smoothing things out. Basically, some other reasons, right? We need IAM projects. Why IAM projects need professional help. Obviously, the SI has previously existing product expertise, right? That's, they should demonstrate this. They see hardening. The SI has hardening expertise, right? So they know how to harden workloads or IAM platforms. SIs have deployment and operational maintenance expertise there, right? They know how to implement policies, how to do software development lifecycle, versioning of policies, promoting policies from lower environments to higher environments. So that's all there. And then obviously managed services is important, right? That's a cost reduction. In today's world, keeping identity and access management people on staff internally can be prohibitively expensive, right? And we're seeing fully loaded salaries for IAM, architects, internal workforce members being between, 130, 150,000 US dollars or their equivalents. Obviously there's geographical differences, but keeping people on staff who are just, twiddling their thumbs, 90% of the time because there's nothing happening after you built out the system and you cannot fire these people is generally not going to be cost efficient. And then, SLAs are usually easier or lower cost to meet with an managed security service provider than with a doing all this in-house, right? People go on vacation, people get sick, their children get sick, they have to stay at home, but the identity and access management framework still has to run, right? So, be able to man this and staff this is a lot less best practices, right? So doing the homework before talking to the system integrator. So getting the requirements gathered from your organization is definitely important. Scoping correctly the project, getting and documenting everything in writing ahead of time is important. And then involvement of internal organizations ahead of time is very important. And listen to your MSSP and SI, please. There's a reason they try to discourage you or talk you out of certain things. They might have run into challenges and problems with that specific requirement or how you want them to implement something. So please listen to the SI. Some predictions: more connectors, more risk focus, shared information used for detecting suspicious identity patterns, shared identity as a service models, and a lot more identity management as a software as a service kind of offering. This still does not take away the need to have system integrators, people who are professionals, help you. So with that, I want to conclude my part of today's setting the stage and hand it back to Heiko.
Thanks, Andras. Yeah, great summary about identity and access management in general and about identity and access management as a managed service. What I like most, listen to your MSP provider for identity and access management. I 100% second that. But to summarize some other thing you said, and which are absolutely right. So one of the very interesting things of IAM, and that's why I love personally identity and access management so much, and why it's so satisfying to deliver successfully projects to customers, is the mixture of technologies, business, and processes. So it's not just a tech project, it brings all together. And basically that's the exciting piece, but also that's the complex piece of identity and access management. And you summarized a couple of reasons why customers involve an SI or a managed services provider for identity and access management. And just to summarize a few what you have said, as a customer, you want to ensure a short time to value, and you want to keep the total cost to a minimum, obviously. So you want to avoid complexity, or you want someone who is able and experienced to manage this complexity. You want to have the expertise of someone who has done it. So avoiding starting from scratch without any best practices, without knowing typical pitfalls and challenges. Scalability is another very important topic. Everyone is affected by a shortage of talents out in the market. So building up an own identity and access management organization and hiring the right people with the experience in the technology the company has decided for. Often it's related to an RFP process where procurement plays a role, that various departments plays a role. So basically at the end of the evaluation process, you know which technology, and then you can start hiring. This is a very important thing. And last but not least, you said the kind of liaison between different business departments and an external consultancy, an MSP provider like ourselves, IC Consult, can have this kind of neutral role in saying, hey folks, let's sit together, let's figure out the best way without any political prejudices, without any political point of views within the organization. Let's be pragmatic and let's focus on how to get this up and running. With this summary, I'd like to start the panel discussion. As initially said, a couple of attendees have joined meanwhile. My name is Heiko Klarl, and I will be moderating today's panel with Andras, chair from Forrester, Heiko Hüttler, CEO of Service Layers, Andre Briebe, CTO of IC Consult, and Stefanos Riga, product owner at BMW, in the order of appearance in my screen. To be clear on that, Heiko, as I summarized Andres' presentation and about why customers decide to go for an IAM as a managed service, what are the key elements when customers are evaluating their future managed services provider?
It's kind of funny I'm getting that question, since actually I think one of the best sources is one of the Forrester reports a couple of years ago, where MSSPs were evaluated in the general managed service providers. And actually that survey tracked two different things. One is really what are people looking for when they look for managed service providers. The other thing is what are key trends that are becoming more and more important. I think that report is now 2 or 3 years old, maybe. So probably nowadays it would be a little bit different. But actually the 5 most important key factors that came out of that survey were really: number 1, level of trust, I think for obvious reasons. Number 2, pricing. So also not very surprising there. Number 3, global footprint and coverage. 4, availability of experts for problem solution. And number 5 is actually dashboards for proper reporting. And I think all of these are kind of obvious, right? If you put enough thought into that, then it's key. One aspect of these I want to stress a little bit, and that is number 4, availability of experts for problem solutions. That is something that, I mean, it's closely related to the level of trust. Do you trust your managed service provider to have the expertise that you need in times where it's really dire? And I think maybe a bit later we will also talk about, I don't know, cybersecurity. Zero trust was mentioned already by Andras. Right, these aspects becoming more and more important for IAM systems in many different ways. So having the right experts available at the hand, and actually I remember that well. Probably all of us do. Short before Christmas, the Log4Shell incident was one of the first calls Stefanos and I had out of our regular status updates. Right, we want to understand, okay, what do we have in our system? What is the impact in the system? How quickly can we fix it, etc. And there it really depends. Whom do you talk to? Do you talk to somebody somewhere in the world who just acts on some tickets and does the tasks, or can you call somebody really quickly who understands the problem, understands the impact, and can provide a resolution quickly? Right. So that is really something that's becoming more important. Also, other 3 aspects were mentioned in that report that become more important. One is consulting. I think that is a very, very interesting aspect. Build more flexibility and scalability in your managed services contracts, right? Every IAM program has constant requirements that are increasing, that are changing. And if you have to set up every single time a full-fledged project for many years, that can get very complicated quickly. So building some flexibility in your managed services contracts that allow you to constantly tackle these requirements that are constantly coming up is really, really helpful. And the big chunks, okay, do products for them still, but having some flexibility in your contracts there really, really helps, at least in my opinion. I hope Stefanos would agree. But that is something that, yeah, even a couple of years ago was on the rise. And last but not least, application security. Having the knowledge about application security in general in your IAM managed services, at least to some extent, right? You will not have your full SOC of your full company inside your IAM managed service probably, but to have sufficient knowledge about application security in these teams is of utmost importance there, I would say. And was the result of that report.
Thank you, Heiko. I think who can answer the question even better is probably a customer. And so basically, routing to Stefanos from BMW, can you share your experience from previous evaluation when you have decided for a technology partner, systems integrator, or managed services provider? What has been important and a kind of key decision criteria for yourself and your team?
Okay, let's maybe start from what Heiko previously mentioned, that there is some understanding of application security at the application. From our experience, it's a little bit different. Most of the times, the application responsibles, they're already aware of the functionality that their application should provide, and this is their main focus, to provide benefit with the application. Application security, such as authentication, authorization, is more on a minor interest of these applications. It has to work and it has to be there, but how it will come there is maybe something that someone else will explain me. These are the security experts that you have in your company. They will explain you then how you have implement security on the application side. And this is where I'm coming from, and this is why we have chosen a partner helping us with that. Because the first thing is we're coming from a company, or I'm coming from a company where we have integrated around 6,000 applications with in some now around 14,000 integrations, and we integrate in order to give a little bit of an overview how many authentication requests are coming from there. So in a daily average, we have around 25 million authentication requests over all these applications. And most of the applications are trying to integrate with us with protocols that they have heard of. Not that they have really a knowledge of that, but they heard about that. And so you have to guide them. So the most important thing is that you're going to try first to figure out what is the architecture of your identity and access management architecture that you would introduce with your company. And you should take care of what is the main focus that you would like to achieve. And if you have to separate identity and access management, maybe, or if you can bring everything together in some. But you need to focus on what is the most important for you. And if you're going to start with that, then most of the times you're not starting on the green field. Most of the times there is something in there. So you need someone that can get an understanding of the architecture that you have and helping you putting this into a balance. So, and if you're going to try to do this on your own without the help of someone external, then you're trying to keep everything as it is, because this is making your life easier. But at the end, this is not helping you. If you're going to deal with these new technologies, such as OIDC, such as SAML and all of these things, then you need to gain this knowledge about that, and you need to try to align to the standards. We have tried to figure out what we have in BMW before we have started with our approach. And then we have figured out that we have all the standards in place. We have OIDC, we have SAML, we have cookie-based authentication. But taking a closer look at that, it's not according to the standards. There are a lot of additional functionalities that were implemented in that. And now if you try to introduce a new standard process and the standardization in that, then you have a lot of things to do. Think of 6,000 applications that you have to reintegrate and that you have to align to standard. You can't do this without any help. You have a lot to do in organizing these applications doing what you want them to. So you need a strong partner that is helping you how to standardize and how to set up the solution for you that it is working out of the box.
Yeah, absolutely right. And basically what you shared are really impressive numbers: 6,000 applications, 14,000 integrations, 25 million authentication requests a day. So pretty much impressive, and I think fully understandable that this is not a one-man show or a one-woman show who can achieve that. You mentioned when it comes to their kind of integration of applications, support to have the right architecture in place, to focus on the right standards, and basically to guide application responsibles, application owners to follow the right approach, to use the right integration patterns, and at the end of the day to build a kind of, so to say, factory approach, to make it quickly and not to reinvent the wheel for each and every application. So it's simple math. If an application touch just takes 2 or 3 days times 6,000, then it's a huge amount of effort. And I know most customers can't calculate in this high numbers. So most likely someone has to do it a little bit quicker. Sometimes when I'm talking to customers and I am responsible at company, everyone sees currently the trend to the cloud, be it cloud migration, big hyperscalers like AWS, Microsoft, and Google, be it the migration to the SaaS offerings of the IAM product vendors. And basically nearly everyone has meanwhile some pretty well compiled offer in place. Andre, how do those kind of SaaS-based IAM offerings relate to the tasks and the responsibilities for a managed services provider? So why should customers decide to go for one despite having a kind of fully managed cloud-based IAM solution?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting, very interesting topic, because obviously SaaS is for most organizations the right way to go when it's about introducing a new identity access management system for obvious reasons, right? Sometimes there's a kind of misconception about what amount of efforts is really saved by going for a SaaS offering compared to my outdated on-prem identity access management. And the amount of effort saved is somehow overestimated. Of course, there are several tasks which are performed by the SaaS providers like providing high availability. For instance, if you have the numbers in mind, Stefanos was telling us, it's crystal clear, a very short outage affects thousands or even millions of people right away, right? Also patches, upgrades, development of new features, disaster recovery. These are all things which are solved by the SaaS provider. But for instance, you don't want typically your application owners directly contact the SaaS provider. Yeah? Stefanos mentioned that, of course, they heard about the protocols, they have a rough understanding about how they have to communicate and integrate with identity access management, but not in detail, not in how does it look like for your particular organization. Yeah? So application integration is a very, very important aspect. Also connecting to a couple of source systems, what to do with the data, connecting to target systems, the provisioning piece. We heard about at the beginning of the talk, also is an important aspect with a couple of complexity, but what the SaaS provider is not helping you. Huh? Also, if you want to enroll capabilities, multi-factor authentication, whatever, into new locations, new subsidiaries, that's something what you have to take care of as your organization. That's nothing a SaaS provider will do right away. And another point I want to mention, which is which really requires a lot of know-how and efforts to really leverage that, is the whole piece of identity orchestration. So most of the SaaS providers are bringing in new capabilities to orchestrate user journeys, to have abstraction layers, to bring in the hybrid infrastructure world we have with distributed identities by nature into one abstraction layer that has to be designed. And that's not just a technical job, you have to focus on that with the business perspective as well. So having said that, my recommendation really is that if you're in that situation that you want to build a clear understanding of what to do when going to a SaaS provider, is build a target operating model with all the tasks you have to take care of. And then get a good understanding what is provided by the provider already selected and what is not provided. And then you might end up in a situation in which you understand, okay, there's a gap between what you and your organization is able to deliver, what the SaaS provider is delivering, and what you really need. And then the managed service provider can cover, I would say, nearly all other aspects which have to be fulfilled at the end of the day. And that really helps. So not overestimating what is delivered by a software as a service. Yeah. Of course, it's not the real custom business specific part. It's a generic part.
So basically not overestimating what, so to say, the vendors are promising, but specifying and outlining a target operating model with a clear structure of tasks, with a clear structure of responsibilities, figure out, is it mine? Is it your? Is it the vendor's job? What does it mean then, Andre, in regards to the kind of minimal capacity or know-how that's needed by a customer internally? So when we look at our customer base, we see completely different organizations. So some organizations have really, really big and huge IAM teams with a lot of expertise from business processes deep into the technology. And some others are kind of lonely wolves, 1, 2, 3 persons probably, and manage, despite their small size of the IAM team, very, very big installations with tremendous amount of users. Is there any best practice, so to say, for, and I'm going for MSP, what's needed at least?
So I would say traditionally managed services focus a lot on the operational side and less on enhancing the service. Of course, there are enhancements to the service, but it's typically making the service more efficient. more stable. So the managed service provider is typically focusing a lot on the non-functional perspective of the task. Yeah? And that makes sense. That's good. That in that situation, there's a risk that over time the service is not fitting anymore to the modern IT landscape. Good example for that is the tremendous requirements driven by zero trust, for instance. And if you're then in the situation that your managed service provider is doing what he's doing all the time, making it a little bit more efficient, a little bit faster, that doesn't help, because it is really about bringing in the new features the SaaS provider is providing into your organization, connected to the new network security world, or not just integrating it, bringing them together. And therefore, there's really a gap between the traditional managed service and what has to be delivered within the organization. And that means there's a huge amount of expert knowledge still required in the organization to fulfill that. And what we are at IT Consult are now focusing on, and believe that this is really a way which generates a lot of value, is also adding advisory and consultancy packages to the managed service in order to prevent this kind of deprecating over time, but really making sure that the SaaS offerings are really leveraged. Whatever the SaaS provider is bringing in, that is checked. Is it helping the organization? Is this solving business requirements? And then, yes, working on a plan how to enroll it into the organization. That helps to reduce the amount of IAM expert requirement in the organization by leveraging these, let's say, enhanced managed service offerings. So that's a lonely wolf is able to deliver to this organization by really leveraging a lot of external capacity, but in a simple managed service contract without going for change requests, new SOWs for every single piece of requirement which pops up. And I think this is also something what becomes clear in the talk of Andres and Stefanos. It's not a project with a begin and end date. It's increasing demand all the time, right? That's what we see every day.
Stefanos is nodding. Probably a good question to you, as you have you are currently working on a big cloudification of your infrastructure. Stefanos and Andre mentioned the advisory and the consultancy around on how to do things right, how to enhance existing IAM installations, moving them most likely often from on-prem to the cloud. What was the reason why BMW and you have decided to cloudify identity and access management and to go for a kind of fully managed service approach?
Yeah, okay. If you're going to start from what we have at the moment, then everything, every request for authentication is managed by our central service in Germany. So we have a single point of entry for the whole world for SSO. So that means if we have an outage here, then this is a really good, huge effect, as you already mentioned. Just think of, we are building up around 10 cars per minute. So if there's an outage and it is affecting the whole world, then just with manufacturing cars in around 10 minutes that you need in order to identify that you have an issue, you have already lost 60 cars. So you need another 5 minutes if you then have created the tickets. So you have 15. So it's summarizing. So after half an hour, you have already 300 cars that you haven't built, and half an hour is really quickly gone. So a single point of failure is something that we don't want to have at the moment, and we want to be closer to our to our business. So we're not just located as a company in Munich. We have also our Chinese departments, we have US, we have South Africa, we have Asia Pacific, we have India. So we need to get closer to our users. And this is easily done with a cloudification. Of course, there you have the hyperscalers that you can use around the world without setting up your own data sources that you need there. So put it there, and if possible, as a SaaS solution, that it remains the same everywhere, because you don't want to double your architecture. You don't want to have it specified for each and every redundancy that you have geo decoupling. So you want to have it in distributed but a similar solution. So this is the thing why we have decided that we would go to cloud in order to have the possibility for easy distribution. But with this easy distribution all over the world, this also means you have to solve additional problems. And here it is much easier to do this with the SaaS solution together with a managed service, because now you have to discuss how you will deal with single sign-on if you have a centrally hosted service. Just think of, if you distribute your user stores to cloud, then you have to separate it through governance regulatories. You have to separate your user stores. So for example, if you go to US, you just have US employees and customers there. Now you have a centrally hosted service that is located in Germany. Your user is logging in US, no problem. But if he's now using the centrally hosted service in EMEA, you don't find the user in here. Now you have to solve additional problems. And some of these problems are solved by the solution itself, but you have to bring it in combination that it is fitting your requirements from the company. So always have to take care, what does it mean? And especially if you're going to find a solution, what is this affecting? Is it just affecting your authentication service or also your applications that you have integrated with? And if you're going to set up such a solution, you need to minimize the effort for each parties, for yourself, and especially for your customers, so your applications primarily. And our managed service provider is helping us here finding the right solution in order to balance these efforts.
I hope so, that we do this way.
Right, now you have done it.
and that we've done it. Yeah, I think that have been a couple of very good points you brought up. So basically, scaling globally brings as another flavor of complexity, another flavor of challenges. But when we put it down, and there is a big audience and a lot of attendees here, when you have to give them one kind of recommendation to your peers that are on the way to identity and access management as a service, is just something you can share as your secret recipe of success?
Secret recipe, I guess, it's quite hard to define here. It was mentioned before, the first thing that you need to have is a clear picture of your wanted architecture, how you have it. You need to analyze your company, what is centralized, what is decentralized. And then you need to focus on standardization, because it wouldn't help you trying to keep all the exceptions up and running for the applications that you have set up. Try to streamline them and try to automate whatever you can. So what we have done is, in order to manage all these applications wherever they are around the world, streamlining it back to the standards, and then putting these standards in the self-service, so that applications can integrate into our single sign-on context automatically. They just have to type in the credentials that they need in order to set up the application. So for example, if you use SAML, what is the authentication level? Which attributes do you need for authorization that you're going to get out of the token? And some other attributes. And if you're going to put this in a self-service and you can execute it automatically, then you simplify your work that you have to do afterwards, and the operation parts very significantly.
Thank you. Just to one remark to the audience, as time goes by and 8 minutes are left, you have the possibility to ask questions via the chat module, so all attendees are muted. just drop your question in the chat, and we will be happy to spend the last minutes in answering the questions. But last but not least, to Andras, when having identity and access management as a managed service for the first time, or having it managed for the first time, how does a kind of successful transformation path look like, given that there are a lot of known unknowns? So after the fact, you're always a little bit smarter and you know more, but before, how can customers achieve that journey successfully?
Yeah. So, a quick list of steps, right? So one, you want to define the governance and ownership of identity and access management, during and after the transition, right? So you need to understand what you keep in-house, what you move out to the MSSP who operates your IAM. Obviously, you want to have a full understanding of the entirety of your applications, architectures, user stores, of the protocols, standards, etc., that you're using or planning to use. Obviously, you want to define the timeline of a transfer. This can be prioritization, phasing. Usually it's not a one-off process or one big bang kind of thing, but slower transition. And then I would also say that using this transition as an opportunity for business process redesign is a big thing, right? Identity and access management, when you move beyond the authentication and access policy enforcement thing and move more towards the identity administration aspects, is very much about business process mapping tools, right? So the more you can simplify processes, easier they will be mapped for it. It will be for the MSSP to map to the identity product. And I would also say, get a defect tracking system to track the implementation defects, both in people, process, and technology areas, and also the improvement requests is something we've seen here in the implementation. So being able to kind of measure this transition against certain, previously agreed to KPIs, key performance indicators, is definitely a good perspective or good best practice as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, so basically cleaning the house by redesigning kind of business process, thinking of what you can get rid of and optimize for the future. And again, as a pattern, business processes and technologies, and providing a proper tracking of defects, of improvement requests, that you just don't focus on solving issues and challenges technology-wise. Often, not often, have to look on the combination of the triple of all three of them: business, processes, technology, to overcome your challenges. I'd like now to grab a question from the audience, and we touched it slightly before with Heiko and Stefanus. It's about 24/7 support coverage for IAM systems, and how important is 24/7 support. So Stefanus had the example with 300 cars in half an hour. Obviously, it sounds kind of important, and 25 million authentications a day distributed by 24 hours. It's more than 1 million, and I think there will be peak times, obviously, to kind of typical office times. Stefanus, 24/7 is very crucial for BMW, I assume.
But not for the whole chain. So if you differentiate between identity management and the authentication services, then of course for authentication services you need 24/7 availability, and which every minute that you're not available, the user can't use the system wherever they are. But if you define a new role for a customer and it can't be distributed in between a minute, and it needs half an hour, I guess then the world is not going down with that. So you maybe can stand that, but this is something that you need to define on your business processes, which are the important parts. So of course, it's obvious logging into a system is crucial, but for all the other things, you need to evaluate if you can maybe be a little bit more patient with some things, and maybe solve it in the correct way with the right resources, and maybe it's taking longer. but then you have the right result afterwards, and not just bringing it up and working again with then not achieving the results that you really need.
What are your views, Heiko, in a minute?
I would totally agree. I mean, you sometimes read in the internet out there, right, that there is a rule of thumb when you go for IGA or enterprise identity management, then 24/7 is not that important. And when you go for access management or privileged access management, it's more important. But I would say this analysis is not enough. You really have to look at your business processes and the impacts of a service not available. And you have to do it more fine-grained than just looking at these buckets. This is absolutely not sufficient. And then it also helps to not say, okay, we found something that requires 24/7, as Stefanos just said, right? Then do not just make everything 24/7, because that will be expensive and maybe totally unnecessary also in the processes that you have to cover afterwards. So really do an analysis, do a proper separation of your user journeys, of the most important aspects of the processes, and then define where you need really what kind of level of attendance. And I remember last time we talked about this, Stefanos, you really said something great, which I think is, if you're a global company spread across the globe, what does 5 by 8, for example, actually mean? Right, you run into these problems sometimes also there. So that's another aspect to look at.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we are coming to an end, unfortunately. So it was a really great discussion, guys, and I like the good exchange, the customer insights, the point of view from the analysts, and the experience of Heiko and Andre from their day-to-day work with customers. You've learned today a lot about IAM Managed Services, challenges and practices for your global cybersecurity strategy, and I hope you benefit with your journey for IAM, be it a managed service or be it a traditional project. There is a recording. The recording will be shared. You can share the recording with your colleagues and co-workers. You can get in touch with me and the colleagues via LinkedIn, via our website, ic-consult.com. And if there's anything we can deepen later on in a one-on-one discussion, we are very happy to support. Thanks for your interest. Thanks for your attendance. Special thanks to Stefanos for taking the time and sharing his experience from a long project experience within IAM at BMW. Thanks for Andras for sharing Forrester's analyst's view, and thanks to Heiko and Andre. And have a great afternoon, Europe. Have a great day, US, and good morning. Good morning soon, Asia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thanks, bye.
Goodbye.